Good evening. Please can I welcome everyone for this virtual meeting of Council. The time is 6 p.m. Before we start the meeting, I would like to ask my chaplain to offer a few words. Reverend Machin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Madam Leader, Mr. Mayor and all the members, there's an ancient Chinese proverb which says, go straight into the heart of danger, for there you will find safety. For most of us, this feels counterintuitive. Why on earth would we choose to walk towards danger when we could hide from it? But to hold this view fails to see the intentional wisdom of the proverb. Fear can be our worst enemy if we let it rule our hearts. It can be isolating, and defending our fears can leave us exhausted, feeling angry, bitter and selfish, no longer able to work with others for good. Facing our fears, however, looking into the heart of danger and risking being vulnerable to each other, turns out the way of becoming one. The key is to bring our dreams into the heart so that we may find the courage to act in the world magnanimously. Because the place of vulnerability we fear is also the source of our greatest strength, our greatest self, and the safest place that we can be. Jesus mirrors this truth to us by walking straight into the heart of danger at the cross in order to set us all free, to bring us to eternal safety. Tonight, as you face what might feel insurmountable challenges, especially given the ongoing impact of coronavirus on our people and our economy, I pray that you will take the risk to be vulnerable enough with each other, to lay down the armour, that you might each work together for the good of all. And in that gift of love for the other, we will all find safety. Amen.
Amen. Okay.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Machin. Please can I welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of Council. This meeting is being held under regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 situation. My name is Councillor Patrick Cunningham, Mayor of Winchester and Chairperson of Council. There are a few, however, housekeeping issues to run through. Please can I ask everyone present in this virtual meeting that your microphones remain muted and your camera is turned off whilst you are not addressing the Council, as this will reduce background noise and avoid any unintentional disturbances. Can I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to undertake a roll call of members of the Council to confirm who is present this evening?
Good evening, members. I will now call each of you in turn in alphabetical order. Councillor Ackwell.
Yes, good evening, present.
Councillor Becker.
Present.
Councillor Bell. I'll return to Councillor Bell in a moment. Councillor Bentate.
Present.
Councillor Bronk.
Present.
Councillor Brooke.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Clear.
Present.
Councillor Clementson.
I'm present.
Councillor Cook.
Good evening, I am present.
Councillor Kraft.
Present.
Councillor Cunningham.
Present.
Councillor Cutler.
Present.
Councillor Evans.
Present.
Councillor Fern.
Present.
Councillor Ferguson.
Present.
Councillor Gemmell.
Here.
Councillor Godfrey.
Here.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Present.
Councillor Hiscock.
Here.
Councillor Horrell.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Humby.
Present.
Councillor Hutchison.
Present.
Councillor Laming. Councillor Laming. I'll try Councillor Laming.
He's present.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lerney.
Present.
Councillor Lumby. Councillor Lumby. I'll return to Councillor Lumby in a moment. Councillor Mather.
Present.
Councillor McLean.
Present.
Councillor Miller.
Present.
Councillor Murphy.
Good evening, I'm present.
Councillor Pearson.
Present.
Councillor Porter.
Present.
Councillor Power.
Present.
Councillor Prince.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Ruffell.
Present.
Councillor Scott.
Present.
Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Todd.
Present.
Councillor Weir.
Present.
Councillor Weston. Councillor Weston.
I'm here.
Thank
Hello,
you.
I'm here.
Councillor Williams.
Present.
I'll just return now to Councillor Bell. Good evening, Councillor Bell. Okay. I think we just have to confirm that Councillor Bell's not present at this time, but we will endeavour to get her into the meeting. Councillor Lumby. Good evening, Councillor Lumby. Okay, I'm unable to confirm that Councillor Lumby can hear us. Officers will endeavour to get Councillor Lumby into the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've just joined, Mr. Mayor.
Apologies, I've just managed to join.
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. Councillor Bell.
Exactly, that's exactly what we only did that one subject.
Hello, Councillor Bell.
No.
No. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Please can I advise that this meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the website and then can be found next to the meeting's details where the recording will remain thereafter. The meeting will also be recorded with the video uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Members and officers, where appropriate, for each item, please only use the chat function of the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak, and I will invite you to then speak at the appropriate time. Each member will be invited to speak in turn, and therefore I would encourage all members to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. If you wish to raise a point of order or explanation in accordance with the Constitution, please also use the chat function only. I will invite that member to speak immediately I become aware of the request. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please make sure that you reference the page or the paragraph number. Finally, members, if members wish to leave the meeting at any point and for any period of time, could they please make themselves known to me through the chat function? I will announce to the meeting that you are to leave the meeting and your return if applicable. Thank you. Agenda item 1. The minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 8th of July 2020. May I sign these as a correct record?
Agreed.
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 That's good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Are there any disclosures of interest to be made regarding the business before us tonight? Councillors?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are some issues where there are issues relating to the County Council's work, and I need to declare a personal but not prejudicial interest as a member of the County Council.
Okay.
Councillor Hiscox also indicating, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hiscox?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
In regards to the finances papers, I'm a council tenant, so I'd just like to declare that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
That was Councillor Scott.
Yeah, and can I also make the same declaration?
Yes, Councillor Hiscox, you're making a declaration as a member of the County Council. Councillor Porter?
Yes, I'm making the same declaration. Thank you.
Councillor Humby,
Yes, the same declaration. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Councillor Hiscock,
I'd like to make the same declaration as Councillor Todd, please.
noted. Have we got more? Yep. So my first,
Mr. Mayor,
yes,
Therese, forgive me for interrupting, but we can see Councillor Bell's face on the screen. Has she managed to indicate she is here?
Thank you,
I
Councillor.
can't understand why it would be there if she wasn't here.
Councillor, can you confirm if
Can I confirm I'm in?
you're in.
Thank
Okay, thank you.
I'm
Sorry
in
to
the
interrupt.
meeting. Thank you.
Great, I can see you now. Thank you, Councillor Bell. My first announcement this evening is to say that my thoughts are with the families and the pupils of Henry Beaufort School in Winchester, following the horrific accident earlier this month involving the school bus. Credit must be given to the swift action of the emergency services, including the City Council, who attended the scene. Past mayors will have been particularly saddened to have learned of the death in July of former mace bearer for the City Council, Dennis Price. Mr. Price carried the great mace for over 30 years, and the smaller maces for several years before that. Several past mayors and officers had attended Dennis's funeral in August. Members will also have learned of the unexpected death of Michael Fawcett. Michael was a valued member of TACT in the role of communication officer and as chair of the Housing Management Delivery Group. He readily gave his time to help improving housing services, supportive of both tenants and officers, and was an enthusiastic participant in committee meetings, where he was always ready with a question. As you have seen from the mayor, I have continued to engage with the local community, both with virtual engagements, video recordings, and meeting people face to face, whilst socially distancing. I've enjoyed recent visits, which have included to Winchester Church's night shelter, as well as Trinity Winchester. Taking the salute at the Phase 1 passing out parade at Sir John Moore Barracks has been a particular highlight so far. This was not a conventional passing out parade, as none of the recruits' families were actually there in person, but on Zoom. However, this was a great occasion and a wonderful honour nevertheless. I would like to thank those ward members who have assisted in organising visits to their communities to enable me to show our support and our thanks to the local groups and organisations who helped support their residents so well during the lockdown. If any other member would like to organise a visit, please contact the Mayor's Secretary, who will make the necessary arrangements. Having visited Bishop's Waltham, which was a huge success, I'm looking forward to visiting other wards in the near future. I was honoured to have laid a wreath on behalf of the Council at the War Memorial at the Cathedral on the 15th of August on the 75th anniversary of VJ Day. Members, you will all be aware of the launch of the Mayor of Winchester's Local Hero Award. This award is to recognise people who have made a real difference during the COVID-19 pandemic. It offers residents the chance to say thank you to all the unsung heroes across the Winchester district who have been putting others first during this extraordinary time. Please consider those local heroes in the communities that you represent who would like to be nominated and who would like to nominate others. Nominations should be supported by up to 100 words about the person or the group who are being put forward for the award, with an option to include a photograph too. Applications close on the 30th of September 2020, and winners will receive a Mayor of Winchester Local Hero Award certificate that can be displayed at home or at work or in a community venue. An online form is available for nominations via the Council's website or can be submitted to localhero@winchester.gov.uk. Please contact the Mayor's Secretary, Debbie Hadwin, to discuss your nomination or any aspect of the award. Thank you. My next announcement this evening is that last Wednesday in Abbey House, I presented former Mayor Councillor Eleanor Bell and her escort, Mr. Alex Bell, with their past mayors and past mayor's escort badges, respectively. We were joined by the leader of the council, Lucille Thompson, and the Strategic Director Resources, Lisa Kirkman. And following the presentation, Councillor Bell thanked the Mayor's Secretary and the events assistant and the senior mace-bearer for their support to both her and Alex during her mayoral year. Finally, members will wish to join me in offering the best thanks of council to Steve Tilbury. Steve leaves the council at the end of this month after 18 years of service. Leader, do you have any announcements?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. My first announcement is that I'm absolutely delighted to let Council know that, as widely reported, the Council is in advanced discussion with Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service about the use of the Guildhall as one of the UK's Nightingale courts. Of course, we will update members as soon as matters develop, so please watch this space. Secondly, I'm also very pleased to confirm that plans are in hand for a local testing unit to be sited within the city to increase testing capacity for COVID-19. Again, when we have more details, we will share these with members. And finally, I'm also delighted to announce that our next edition of About Winchester, the newspaper that we produce half yearly, is about to go online and should be with members in digital form by the end of the week. We're just making a few tweaks regarding the COVID situation, which of course has changed quite dramatically in the last 24 hours. And once they're done, it will be online this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Executive, do you have any announcements, please?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Members, I just wanted to share some activity we've been taking over the last couple of weeks in respect of the pandemic. Over the last couple of weeks, we've received guidance from government to help the country battle the threat of COVID-19. In response, we have sent advice to our businesses to help them set up QR codes to support track and test. We have started to establish our approach to support those on low incomes who have to isolate as they work from home as a result of a positive test. Our local response centre is still in place, and we have a COVID secure workplace to enable our staff to work at home as per the Prime Minister's advice last night, or in the office as their job demands. Members, we continue to monitor this situation carefully and take all necessary action to continue to support the district over the coming months. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Please can I welcome members of the public who have been invited to attend this meeting and have submitted questions for council to ask. Please can I ask that until I call your name that you keep your microphone muted and your cameras switched off. Thank you. I understand that we have received 3 questions for this evening's meeting. All members have copies of the questions received, which have been circulated electronically and have also been published on the Council's website. Please can I now call upon Martin Wilson to ask his question. Mr. Wilson, please can you confirm that you are present this evening?
I can confirm I am present. Thank you.
Please can you ask your question as it is written on the order paper, or if you prefer, simply refer members to this. You will have 2 minutes to ask your question. A reminder that following the response given by the member, you may also ask one supplementary question which must arise directly out of the original question to reply. Did you understand that, Mr. Wilson?
I did understand that, thank you.
Thank you. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the leader agree that when members of the public are given the opportunity to ask questions at council meetings and they take the trouble to do so and to appear at those meetings, it is unacceptable when the questions and supplementary questions are not answered or are deflected to another meeting where the questions are not even acknowledged. If she agrees, please could full answers be provided to the question posed at the meeting of full council on the 8th of July.
Mr. Wilson, thank you very much. Leader, can you please respond?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Wilson, for your question. Of course, the administration answers all questions as fully as we can at the time of asking, and we remain committed to open and transparent decision making. We introduced for the first time the opportunity for the general public to put questions in this way to Council in 2019 when we took office. The subject of your question was the leisure centres, which at the time of asking was a very fast moving situation and was answered at that time as best we could then. We were grappling with the best way to reopen our leisure centres to the community in a safe way following their closure as a result of government instruction related to COVID-19. As the Cabinet member stated in her original reply, all relevant matters were indeed considered at the Cabinet meeting on the 22nd of July. Council members and members of the public were able to speak at that meeting. A recording of the minutes of that meeting, a recording and minutes of that meeting are available on the Council website to accompany the Cabinet report. The Cabinet report contains information that answers the question about payments to Places for People, and I refer you to that comprehensive paper. And of course, the Council will ensure that Places for People undertake proper maintenance and repairs that are their responsibility. To clarify, historic payments to the Council's leisure operator totalled 1.6 million over the period 1997 to 2014. A further £225,000 was paid to the operator, has been paid to the operator since 2014 up to the 31st of March 2020. The £13 million figure is entirely incorrect, and I am satisfied that no further investigation of these issues is required. The RPLC building has reached the end of its useful life and has in recent years continued to be maintained on an essential repairs only basis to reflect the fact that it was due to close with the opening of the Bar End site. Statutory obligations have been maintained and reactive maintenance has been undertaken to ensure that the centre functions and operates safely with planned maintenance, and any capital costs were limited by agreement between the Council and Places. I'm very pleased to note that the Council's new leisure operator, Everyone Active, has successfully worked with the Council to reopen both our leisure centres as planned on the 1st of September 2020, and that this has been widely welcomed by our community.
Thank you, Leader. Mr. Wilson, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
You were muted, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, you're muted. Do you want to unmute, please?
Okay, apologies. I would like to ask a supplementary question, if I may. Thank you for that answer. Supplementary question. The inventory for equipment at RPLC is dated 2014. Can the leader please explain how accurate figures for any equipment to be purchased as part of the termination settlement are to be calculated, and why items such as toilets, urinals, sinks, soap dispensers, toilet cubicles and toilet roll holders are to be included?
Leader.
I seem to be getting a bit of feedback. Thank you very much for your supplementary. I'm afraid I'm not aware of what is exactly on the inventory, and I think we would have to look at that and get back to you, but thank you for raising it.
Thank you, Leader. And to Mr. Wilson, thank you for your question. Please may I remind you that your question and the answer will be published on the Council's website in due course. Mr. Wilson, may I ask that you now turn off your camera and your microphone for the remainder of the meeting. You are, of course, welcome to remain in the meeting. Alternatively, if you prefer, you can leave by pressing the telephone symbol with the red background. Of course, you can continue to listen to the live audio stream from the Council's website but thank you once again. Please can I now call upon Rebecca Butler, who has also submitted a question. Ms. Butler, please can you confirm that you are present this evening?
I am present, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Butler, please can you also ask your question as it is written in the order paper, or if you prefer, simply refer members to this. You will have 2 minutes to ask your question. A reminder that following the response given by the member, you may also ask one supplementary question which must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. Please ask your questions, Butler.
Madam Leader, Mr. Chairman, my question is this. How does the Liberal Democrat Council propose to fund its 2024 carbon neutral policy?
Ms. Butler, thank you very much. Councillor Murphy, can you respond, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for your question, Ms. Butler. The Council's Carbon Neutrality Action Plan sets out its ambitions to become a carbon neutral council by 2024 and district by 2030. To help achieve this, an allocation of £500,000 has been made available from General Fund reserves to deliver a programme of action over a 2-year period to 2022. A further £10 million investment has been identified in the Housing Revenue Account business plan to improve energy efficiency of the Council's housing stock. Finally, we seek every opportunity to bring in additional funds through applications to sources such as government programmes, the Local Economic Partnership and European funding. For example, we recently secured £5.6 million to increase provision for the park and ride service at the Voltex site. And we currently have close to £500,000 of funding bids awaiting a decision, all of which will further enhance our carbon reduction programme.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Ms. Butler, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Murphy. Yes, I would like to ask a supplementary question. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has estimated that there is a £6.5 billion funding gap for local governments following the coronavirus lockdown and the subsequent economic fallout. Given that the proposal given by the Liberal Democrat Council in Winchester has suggested that 2,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide will be reduced by green energy billing, how is it proposed by the Council that they can achieve anywhere near carbon neutrality when in fact only 25% of the national grid is renewable energy provision?
Thank you for your question. This the climate emergency has been a part of the council plan. It's a very important part of our council plan, and we believe a green recovery is non-negotiable. It will be a challenge to meet our 2024 and 2030 targets, but we have lots of plans in place that were set out in that carbon neutrality action plan. And the recent flash floods last month showed just how important it is to try and hit our climate emergency and sort that out. So we will be doing all we can. And Sir David Attenborough's latest programme shows 1 million species at risk of extinction. And again, that shows exactly what we must be doing. So yes, it will be tough, but it's set out in our action plan what we're trying to do, and we will try and do that as best we can.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. And to Ms. Butler for your question. Your question and the answer will be published on the Council's website in due course. Ms. Butler, may I please ask that you now turn off your camera and mute your microphone for the remainder of the meeting. You are, of course, welcome to remain in the meeting. Alternatively, if you prefer, you can leave by pressing the telephone symbol with the red background. Of course, you can continue to listen to the live audio stream from the Council's website. Thank you once again. Please can I now call upon Patrick Davis, who has also submitted a question this evening. Mr. Davis, please can you confirm that you are present?
I am indeed.
Please in that case, can you ask your question as it is written in the order paper, or if you prefer, simply refer members to this. You will have 2 minutes to ask your question. A reminder that following the response given by the member, you may also ask one supplementary question which must arise directly out of the original question or the reply to it.
Thank you. How precisely will the City Council challenge the government's algorithm in its latest planning consultations, which require a centrally imposed massive increase in new house building in Winchester?
Mr. Davis, thank you very much. Councillor Porter, can you please respond?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Davis. The Council is carefully considering response to both of the government consultations, in particular the first one that you mentioned, including the proposed change to the current planning system relating to that methodology for generating a housing number for the district, which will produce a higher number of homes than there would need to be planned for. The original plan was 692, it's now 1024. A response is currently being prepared and it is due to be discussed at a special cabinet meeting on the 29th of September 2020, which is next week. The response to the second paper, The Future of Planning, is on the 21st of October. We are particularly concerned about the double use of the affordable ratio to calculate the number of homes to be built and the apparent lack of consideration that approximately 40% of our district won't be available for us to plan homes. So yes, we are very clearly challenging that in our response to the first paper.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Mr. Davis, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, indeed, if I may. It's a very helpful answer the Cabinet member has given, and I've read the paper going to the special meeting next week. But I'm concerned because the government does not need legislation to impose its new housing targets, and it's already indicated it will do so in the autumn. Isn't it therefore vital for the Council, outside the formal responses, to lobby now all Hampshire MPs and cooperate with the local government association, both nationally and locally, for an all-party concerted approach to this problem? Not least as even this very lunchtime at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister asserted again that his housing targets, which, quote, are very ambitious, will focus on brownfield, which is clearly totally impossible in Winchester with the figures that we're now talking about.
Councillor Porter.
Yes, Mr. Davis, in fact, you'll notice in the detail of the response that the City Council is giving that we do highlight that issue about brownfield. We are very short of brownfield in Winchester in the district. And yes, we did agree that we would lobby our MPs and anybody else that would listen to the issue that basically the Conservative government is fully expecting to hand down a completely non-negotiable figure to us as a local district. The potential provision of a green belt adds to this challenge for us, but at the moment there's nothing in the paper that talks about additions of new green belts, but nor does it give protection against the fact that you have a national park occupying 40% of your area. So yes, and we know that within the county council, who actually are making their response to the paper at exactly the same time as we are on the 29th of September, that they have a significant number of challenges to the principles of the infrastructure levies, and also we do know that we are going to be having to look at the first homes principle in that first paper, and again we know that often the second home is the real challenge to the rung on the ladder, not the first.
Thank you, Councillor Porter, and to Patrick Davis for your question. Your question and the answer again will be published on the Council's website in due course. Mr. Davis, may I ask that you now turn your camera off and mute your microphone for the remainder of the meeting. You are welcome to remain in the meeting. Alternatively, if you prefer, you can leave by pressing the telephone symbol with the red background. Of course, you can continue to listen to the live audio stream from the Council's website. And thank you once again. Agenda item 5A, recommended minutes of Cabinet held 16th of September 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 5A is the recommended minute of Cabinet of the 16th of September 2020, and this is set out on the supplementary agenda. Report CAB 3256 refers, and this is within your main agenda pack from page 13. The report's recommendations refer to the approval of a revised revenue budget and capital programme. Council is also asked to support the leader in thanking community groups and local councils for the essential work in supporting our district during the pandemic. Mr Mayor, please can I remind members that a recorded vote will be required on motions, amendments or substantive motions relating to approval of this revised budget and capital programme. Thank you.
The corresponding recommended minute of Cabinet held on the 16th of September 2020 was included with the supplementary agenda after the statutory deadline. I have decided to accept the recommended minute onto the agenda because of the urgent need for Council to consider this alongside Report CAB 3256 at this evening's meeting. Councillor Cutler, would you move the recommended minute of Cabinet, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The paper CAB 3256, the revised general budget, has been discussed quite widely at the Scrutiny Committee and at Cabinet. The paper had 5 recommendations. The first 2, referring to the Guildhall and virtual meetings, were resolved by Cabinet, and the events of this week, I think, vindicate those decisions. We have 3 recommendations to debate this evening. The third of these, the efforts of community groups and local councils in supporting essential work to support our district, is recognised, and the leader writes to all the groups to thank them for their ongoing support, is, I hope, uncontroversial. I'm sure that members will be able to support it. I hope that members also feel the other 2 items, the approval of the revised revenue budget and the approval of the revised capital programme, are similarly uncontroversial. When I presented the 2021 budget proposals in February, I expressed concern that we were approaching a time of great uncertainty. My concerns at the time were more about the potential effects of a no-deal Brexit, but I did raise the possibility that coronavirus might cause some disruption. Because of that uncertainty, our budget sought to address the long-term deficits bequeathed to us by the previous administration, and we produced a balanced budget for the next 2 years. I recall at the time we were somewhat predictably attacked for adding to our reserves. I certainly don't claim great powers of foresight, but our budget left us in a stronger position to deal with arguably the greatest challenge to our finances ever seen. The finance team realised very early in lockdown that it was crucial to begin modelling the potential outcomes, and as early as May, we had a clear idea of the effects on the finances and had produced a range of scenarios, ranging from optimistic to pessimistic. By July, our pessimistic forecast had become, sorry, I'll just move down my notes. Our pessimistic forecast had become the base case. This was the position described to members in what I think was a very useful briefing session on the 23rd of July. And it showed that our likely deficit on the February budget of £10.7 million. Now, this is caused primarily by a significant fall in parking income and also a reduction in the collection of commercial rents. This accounts for nearly 6 million of the deficit. The full breakdown can be seen at point 11.2 on the paper and in Appendix 1. Very welcome government support is estimated to reduce the deficit by nearly 5.5 million to around about 5.2 million. And this is the deficit that we address in this report. It has proved possible to identify spending reductions of just over £1 million, as shown in the table at point 16.3, a mix of spending that's simply not happened due to the pandemic and some elements that can be deferred. The remaining 4.15 million of the deficit is addressed by savings, deferrals and amendments to the capital programme as detailed at 17.1. This allows the release of these funds to the capital receipt reserve, where the funds can be used to fund capital projects that would have been funded from revenue reserves. Thus, the combination of expenditure savings and adjustments to the capital programme as set out in this paper addresses the projected £5.2 million deficit and produces a balanced budget without raiding our uncommitted reserves, which I'm sure Council will enthusiastically endorse. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I so move the motion. the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder to the recommendation?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
Councillor Lerney. Okay, thank you, Councillor Lerney. Do you wish to reserve the right to speak, Councillor?
I do, thank you.
Okay. So we move on to questions. Do we have any questions, please? No questions. Councillor Lumby. Councillor Lumby, do you have a question to put?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes,
can you hear okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'd asked at the cabinet meeting about the BAPSI bequest rather, in the context of closing the Guildhall, and I was told it's been looked at by the legal team and that I would be provided with copies of the relevant documents. My concern is we should not be voting to do anything which may place us in breach of our obligations. And I'm sure that Councillor Todd agrees with that, as he tweeted on 10th September in relation to the government. And of course, in no circumstances should they break their commitments in a limited and specific way. I can't do a very good impersonation of Councillor Todd. I apologise for that. So we don't want to do that anyway. Being looked at by the legal team suggests the analysis was ongoing. Has this now been completed, and what was that advice? I've also not yet received the documents, which is a shame as it's now before council, and I think we'd all like to know what they say. When can I expect to receive them? I also note the leader's announcement about the Guildhall being potentially used as a Nightingale court. Does this impact on the BAPSI advice? Will that come back to council for further consideration? Will all our costs be covered? And will all the various jobs being put at risk by this proposal be saved as a result? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. Councillor Cutler, please.
I think Councillor Lumby's question is somewhat separate from the paper, given that the decision on the Guildhall has already been taken. However, in terms of the legal advice, we're quite clear that the BAPSI request does not impact on this, but I defer to Lisa Kirkman, perhaps for a more detailed response, and can only apologise to Councillor Lumby that he wasn't provided with the advice.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. I have another question. This time we've got Councillor Godfrey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the paper to which this minute relates, in page 17 of that, in the cabinet paper, in section 17.1, it lists 4 of the projects or capital investments that will be impacted by this call on the reserves to fund this year's revenue budget. 2 of those are dipping into the car park maintenance reserve. One was to provide a new coach park facility, and the other was to provide improvements to the Chesil Street car park. Could the executive member please confirm that neither of these pieces of work will now go forward in future? And secondly, where will coaches park, particularly when and if we have a Christmas market again in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. In terms of the coach park being moved to the South Park and Ride solves and reduces the degree of expenditure needed. In terms of Chesil, it is a deferral of the maintenance work into next year, which I think is fairly clear from the paper. For more detail on this, I think Councillor Todd is in perhaps a better position than I am to respond. But in terms of the effect on the on the budget, in the case of, as I say, in the case of Chesil, it's a deferral. In the case of the coach park, it's money that does not need to be spent right now.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miller, you have a question to ask Councillor Cutler?
Yes, thank you. Can you confirm that under 18.2 that any such lease of the Guildhall will come back for the full council to consider? And most of my other points, in fact, were covered by Councillor Lumbie about the staff and whether they be TUPE'd, etc. So that's my only part of my question left.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cutler?
No, I cannot confirm that it will come back to council. I think the negotiations are fairly ongoing, and if the chance arises, it needs to be taken ahead. I cannot actually give you any further details on this because we are in negotiation at the moment.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps if I may, Catherine Knight is available on the call to who has looked into the matter in relation to BAPSI, so can help us as far as possible this evening with that question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll call on the officer concerned. Catherine, if you'd like to answer the question, please.
Councillor Lumbie, the legal team, Councillor Lumbie, I can assure you the legal team have looked into the matter of the lease to the courts and the BAPSI request and are content for the lease to go ahead. If you want me to discuss any more detail with you outside this meeting, I'm more than happy to, because your questions are quite detailed.
I do want to.
That would be very kind if that was possible. Sorry, am I allowed to answer that question?
You are, yes.
Well, I have anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, please. Thank you, Catherine.
Can I move down to debate, please? Is there a debate? Does anybody wish to speak in debate on the matter, please? I don't think there's anyone wishing to involve themselves in the debate at this point in time, so I'm going to call on Councillor Cutler to...
Councillor Godfrey,
sorry.
Mr. Mayor has just indicated.
Councillor Godfrey again. Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak. You're not giving me enough time with my little fingers to type out the message to ask me to speak. The council does face considerable financial pressure, and this paper.
Unfortunately, we've lost you, Councillor Godfrey.
There's a blessing in all these things. Unfortunately, somebody muted me while I was speaking.
Yes, if you proceed.
The paper addresses many of the immediate challenges that the council faces with its finances. And I accept that this is an inevitable consequence of the pandemic and its impact on Winchester City Council. However, the challenges that will come forward in subsequent years are what we need to be worrying about even more. And I'm going to say I look forward to the next review of a medium-term financial strategy. I don't look forward to it. It is going to be a difficult discussion, not least because the current paper is already taken up pretty much all the available reserves that can be quickly used. So our opportunities to invest in Winchester to build up a war chest to help businesses and communities recover from a pandemic has already been whittled away by this paper before us. which I think is unfortunate, although there may be no alternatives. We have got the reserves at the moment, which have been built up over a number of years, and we must look and take action now to replace those with firm plans to invest in Winchester to help the community and to help the council. I think we would want to see that coming forward as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. I'll now call on Councillor Evans, if I may, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are in very strange times, sort of unique times, certainly for all of us, and with an uncertain future. Will there be a recovery, or will we be sinking further down, or we just don't know? So I would like personally to congratulate Councillor Cutler and the officers and the Cabinet for bringing forward this revised budget, which does go a long way to address the 10.7 million deficit as best as they can. And I agree with Councillor Godfrey that we should be looking to the future, but we don't know what the future is going to be. So for now, I think we should say this is a job well done, congratulations, and then we will tackle the next hurdle when it comes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. If I could call on Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I will be supporting this revised budget. Members will remember that when we introduced our first budget back in February, I don't think anyone could have predicted that because of the COVID crisis, just 6 months on, we will be facing a budget deficit of over £10 million. I remember at the time the opposition attacking us for putting money into the reserves, which we did to ensure that we had funds available to deal with, for instance, the climate emergency. So I really think that local people are fortunate that we took a prudent approach then, because those funds are still there. I think Councillor Godfrey's under a misapprehension here. They are still there, even though we do not need to use them at the moment. It will be crucial to have additional reserves if we're forced to go into another lockdown and need to continue to provide essential services for all our residents. I hope you will agree that although we've had to dig deep to recover the deficit, it is really heartening that we have not at this moment had to raid our reserves. It has been a rollercoaster ride since the pandemic hit. We were originally told by government at the outset, spend whatever you have to and we will reimburse you. Well, we kept our side of the bargain and we took them at their word, as did lots of other local councils up and down the country. We didn't hold back in ensuring that our communities and residents were helped when they needed it most. As you know, amongst other things, we set up a local response centre, hand-delivered prescriptions, did the shopping for residents, called our elderly housing tenants and distributed over £28 million in business grants. And we also kept our parks and open spaces open throughout. This was all in addition to maintaining our regular services across the district to all our residents. During this time, we weren't counting the cost, but we had been promised that we would be reimbursed by government. But quite astonishing, Mr. Mayor, although we have had some money paid into the coffers, I'm sorry to say that the government have reneged on that promise. And as you will see from the papers, even the £3.8 million promised still hasn't arrived in our bank account. Just one more example of the chaotic national response to this crisis. We do not bring this report to you lightly, as there are items and decisions in it which we really wish we didn't have to make. And at Cabinet, there was discussion about the closure of the Guildhall. But let's not forget, we inherited a situation where the Guildhall had been making a loss each year of around £500,000, and it was a loss that we just couldn't continue to carry. The continuing restrictions have meant that public bookings have been few and far between, and so we had no choice but to recommend that it remains closed and operates as a venue-only venue. The announcement that I made earlier that we are in negotiations with the Courts and Tribunal Service for the Guildhall to be used temporarily as a Nightingale Court is very welcome, not least because it ensures use of the building and will give us a small income. But it allows us to review the situation also in 6 months' time. And let's not forget that when the Liberal Democrats took control of the council in 2019, we faced an accumulated projected budget deficit of around £19 million. So to have brought a balanced budget to council back in February was no mean feat. And in the present circumstances, I would like to thank officers for all their hard work, both on that one back in February, on the earlier budget, and now on this one too. This budget will allow us to continue to support our most vulnerable residents during the continuing COVID crisis, while at the same time deliver our vital services across the district that all our residents really depend on. So once again, on behalf of the council and local people, I want to thank firstly our fantastic staff who have worked so hard in very difficult circumstances and continue to serve us so well during the crisis, and also the plethora of organisations who really stepped up. And I am absolutely delighted to be writing to each and every one of them to thank them for their support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I have Councillor Lamming. Councillor Lamming. Councillor, stop you right there, please.
Mr. Mayor.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Now I'm not able to continue with Councillor Lamming. I propose to move on to Councillor Lerney, first of all, who has reserved the right to reply as the seconder of the motion. Councillor Lerney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to once again thank our finance team for the work they've done since the very beginning of this crisis to help us deal with the financial issues as they have arisen. In being able to put forward a balanced position, we are in a much better situation than many other councils across the country. As Councillor Godfrey has pointed out, we face many challenges going forward as a result of this crisis. And we were already having to deal with the £19 million hole in the medium-term financial position left by the previous Conservative administration. There are many difficult decisions we are going to have to make, the Guildhall being the first of many, a decision the Conservatives still seem to be dithering about and want to delay further. But we can take those difficult decisions and deal with the financial problems we will inevitably have going forward if we all pull together. And as a starting point, I would urge that we agree this budget today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cutler, do you wish to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm heartened by the positive response from some members and somewhat disappointed, I think, that Councillor Godfrey seems to misunderstand the nature of of how we've put together this budget. A £5.2 million deficit is going to have an effect somewhere. What has happened with moving, particularly on the capital budget side of things, means that it may bring forward the time that we have to borrow slightly earlier. But what we have done is stabilised the situation and not raided our uncommitted revenue reserves. This creates flexibility if the situation deteriorates further this year, which is a possibility. And it also gives us more stability as we work on dealing with the likely future deficits in the medium-term financial strategy if our income doesn't return to normal levels next year. The budget addresses the very serious position the council finds itself in following the severe reductions in income and the additional costs caused by the national crisis. It allows us to be sure that we can fulfil our legal obligation to have a balanced revenue account budget, and I ask that council approve the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Is the recommended minute of Cabinet with recommendations 3 and 4 on page 14 of the agenda pack agreed?
Agreed.
No.
Agreed. We have to take a recorded vote, I think.
Agreed.
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 Recorded vote. Recorded vote.
Agreed. We have to have a recorded vote, and I will now ask the Democratic Services Officer to call your names in alphabetical order, and please can you indicate whether you are in favour, against, or you wish to abstain? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll now call out your names in alphabetical order, and as Mr. Mayor said, please indicate if you are for, against, or abstain on the recommendations. Councillor Ackwell.
For.
Councillor Becker.
For.
Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell. I'll return to Councillor Bell in a moment. Councillor Bentote.
For.
Councillor Bronk.
For.
Councillor Brooke.
Abstain.
Councillor Clear.
For.
Councillor Clementson. Good evening, Councillor Clementson. Councillor Clemenson. I'll return to Councillor Clementson if Councillor Clementson is still present. Councillor Cook.
Abstain.
Councillor Krask.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
Abstain.
Councillor Cutler.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Fern.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For.
Councillor Gemmell.
Abstain.
Councillor Godfrey.
Abstain.
Councillor Gordon Smith.
For.
Councillor Hiscock.
For.
Councillor Horrell.
Abstain.
Councillor Humby.
Abstain.
Councillor Hutchison.
For.
Councillor Lehman. Councillor Lehman. Sorry, Councillor Lehman.
I think I heard 4.
Okay.
I think I heard
We
4.
would need that.
Perhaps you could put it in chat.
Chat.
Councillor Laming, if you can put your vote in the chat, we can take your vote, otherwise we'll have to mark you as a null vote. Oh, 4. I see that in the chat, Councillor Laming. We'll mark you 4.
Thank you. Councillor Learning.
For.
Councillor Lumby.
Abstain.
Councillor Mather.
Abstain.
Councillor McLean.
Abstain.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Miller.
Abstain.
Councillor Murphy.
For.
Councillor Pearson.
Abstain.
Councillor Porter.
For.
Councillor Power.
For.
Councillor Prince.
4.
Councillor Reid.
Abstain.
Councillor Raphael.
Abstain.
Councillor Scott.
Abstain.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Todd.
4.
Councillor Weir.
4.
Councillor Weston.
Abstain.
Councillor Williams.
4.
Please, can I now return to Councillor Bell?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Clementson? Members, if just give us a moment, we'll just check if Councillor Clementson is still on the call. Councillor Clementson?
David, is Matthew. I've tried a couple of times to call Councillor Clementson back in, and I've been unsuccessful so far.
That's a no vote.
No vote.
Okay, thank you, members. Just give officers a couple of moments and we'll have a tot up.
So, members, just before Mr Mayor announces the results there, that was a recorded vote in respect to recommendation 3 and 4 on page 14 of the order paper. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
The recommendation has been accepted and it is carried. 24 to 16.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And then it's recommendation 5.
Recommendation 5. There's recommended minute of Cabinet Recommendation 5 on page 14 of the agenda pack to be agreed. All those in favour?
Agreed.
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 All those against?
Agreed. Agreed.
Any against?
Against.
1 against. Any abstentions? I think that is agreed.
Yes.
That is agreed. I believe that is agreed. Thank you for that. Agenda item 5B, recommended minutes of Scrutiny Committee held on the 2nd of July 2020.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, agenda item 5B is the recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee of the 2nd of July 2020, and this is on page 49 of your report. SC026 refers. This is also in your agenda pack from page 51. The report's recommendations with regard to noting the annual scrutiny report for 1920. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Brooke, would you move the recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As previously stated, this report came to the Scrutiny Committee on the 2nd of July. This came through, we all noted it at the Scrutiny Committee. There were no amendments or adjustments to the paper, so I'd like the council this evening to note as per the recommendations. Thank you, I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Lumby.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. Thank you. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak, Councillor?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Brooke.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Do we have any questions? Okay. Do we have any questions on the recommended minute? I don't believe there's any questions coming through. No questions. Okay, can we move on to debate in that case? Do we have anyone involved who wishes to enter debate?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Do you wish to sum up, Councillor? Sorry, Councillor Brooke. Do you wish to sum up at this point?
I don't think there's much to sum, but thank you.
Councillor Lumby, you did reserve the right. Do you have anything to say?
Unusually for me, no.
Okay.
Always got something to say.
Right. Is the recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee on page 49 of your agenda pack agreed? All those in favour?
Agreed.
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 All those against?
Agreed.
Agreed. And is my voice any better now?
It is.
Yeah,
Well
it
done.
is.
Thank you, Councillor Lemon.
Well done.
Agreed.
Welcome to the meeting.
We would say no.
Any abstentions? That is carried. I am convinced and pleased that that is carried. Agenda item number 6, notices of motion. The agenda sets out a notion of motion to be moved by Councillor Horrell. Councillor Horrell, do you have a seconder for your motion, please?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Brooke.
Councillor Brooke. Councillor Brooke, are you wishing to second the motion?
I second the motion.
And you reserve your right to speak, do you?
Yes, please.
Councillor Horrell, would you present your motion, please? And may I remind you that you have a maximum of 8 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to table the motion this evening. Our residents tell us the local plan is seen as one of the most important documents that the City Council takes responsibility for. It is therefore important that councillors consider all of the issues and options that we need to address as part of the new local plan development, which is why we raise the important matter of a green belt today for all councillors to consider, as this has not been raised in another forum for full debate. South Hampshire has experienced a substantial amount of development over the last 60 years. It has seen its population grow, the expansion of the cities and larger towns into the countryside, and completely new communities established. During the coronavirus lockdown, we have seen a greater appreciation of our countryside and an awareness of the role that open spaces, nature and our countryside near our homes plays in our well-being. 4 district councils in our area have been asked to support the principle of a green belt for South Hampshire, which includes the countryside north of the cities of Portsmouth and Southampton, and importantly, helps to prevent the coalescence of our towns and villages. We know from government consultation papers on planning and housing that the duty to cooperate is likely to be removed, and so the likelihood of developments against borders from neighbouring authorities will probably increase. We therefore need to be clear in our own authority where we want to continue to see our countryside protected. We already know from research conducted by CPRE that a green belt can generate health, well-being, ecosystems and economic benefits to the value of £26 million a year. The health and well-being part of this for those living in and around the proposed area of the countryside amounts to 17 million. And given well-being is one of the core strategies for the council, I hope you will agree this is worthy of serious consideration. At a time when we are discussing the reinvigoration of our economy, the opportunity to grow our tourism and recreation benefits on the back of the green belt to the value of 1.3 million per annum is also very attractive. We need to ensure the value of our countryside is retained by the protection of a green belt, which is the only effective means of legislation available against urban sprawl. We are asking today that Winchester puts down a marker when considering where to locate development. We are advocating a genuine brownfield first approach. In particular, given the pandemic, we may need to be thinking more about repurposing our town centres for housing in the light of retail declines. We're also supportive of this being raised with our local MPs who can lobby the government for their endorsement. I've heard it said by councillors from the other side of the chamber that if we recommend a green belt, This will push development into the north and west of Winchester. I say this is just scaremongering. We've already heard about the financial benefits, but we know a green belt will provide a really important aspect for us. It will assist us in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of land and buildings. It will check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. It will prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, assist in safeguarding the countryside, and preserve the setting and special character of historic towns. Excuse me. So why would this not be worthy of consideration when we're developing the new local plan for Winchester? We know that current policies across the south of Hampshire area have not protected gaps between settlements to date. If we align with other local authorities such as Eastleigh, who passed a motion in July to encourage South Hampshire councils to support a green belt in future planning proposals, we can work in partnership with our neighbours to protect our valued countryside. I would urge the council to consider the benefits of such an approach and to support the motion this evening for Winchester City Council in developing its strategic and issues and options as part of the forthcoming update of the Winchester local plan and as part of its participation in the refresh of the PUSH sub-regional strategy, that it supports the principle of a South Hampshire Green Belt designation for the countryside north of the cities of Portsmouth and Southampton, and to prevent coalescence of our towns and villages. And that support for the designation also be sought with neighbouring authorities. Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I move the motion.
Thank you for your motion, Councillor Harrell. The Council now has up to 20 minutes to debate the motion, and I shall call firstly on Councillor Lerney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to speak on this motion not as a Cabinet member or as a Liberal Democrat, but as Ward Councillor for St Barnabas, former Ward Councillor for Littleton, and someone who's lived and worked in Winchester or its villages for most of my life. Whatever Councillor Horrell has said, in combination with the National Park and the government pledge to build £300,000 new homes per year by the end of this Parliament, a pledge which has led to a proposed 10-year housing target of over 10,000 homes for the district. This proposal will definitely push damaging and unsustainable levels of development to the west, north and northeast of Winchester, as well as into the existing settlements as proposed by Councillor Horrell. Anyone with any level of economic literacy reading the financial assessment CPRE commissioned into their proposal will quickly realise that the gains in not building around Southampton and Portsmouth are at the expense of wherever that new housing ends up. To be fair to all our residents in the district, we must consider how we best protect our countryside and open space across the whole district, not in just part of it. The government's planning for the future white paper indicates that we may get new tools to do this, while ministerial pronouncements suggest that there's very little likelihood of new green belts being permitted. In or adjoining my ward in Winchester, currently we have 2,000 homes being built at Barton Farm, 1,000 proposed for the Sir John Moore Barracks in Littleton, and continual infilling in urban areas. In the last 2 years in my ward, applications for over 100 homes were granted or await decision. These all put extra stress on local infrastructure and services. And while Winchester itself is able to take additional housing over time, it will reach the point where those pressures are unmanageable. This proposal has owners of fields from Hursley round to Alresford rubbing their hands with glee. In particular, Micheldever New Town was rejected by a previous government as an unsustainable location, yet this motion puts it firmly back on the table. We know that Hampshire County Council are already discussing it with the potential developer. Now, we all understand the popularity of this proposal in the south of the district, but Councillor Horrell and her fellow Conservatives are stamping all over the interests of many of the residents they represent, and in my view, they should be ashamed of themselves. Let's look for a fair and equitable distribution of housing in this district in sustainable places. Let's not just wipe a whole area off the map at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halloranny. I'll call on Councillor Pearson, if I may, please. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to spend a little time with history. I think it was in the 1960s, a man called John Buchanan put forward the idea of development in South Hampshire, and he called that area Solent City. And within Solent City, he had a series of what he called green lungs. That's strips of countryside going through the city from north to south in order to create biodiversity and, in actual fact, at that time, to create oxygen to take up the emissions from the housing in the area. That idea was turned down. I can't remember whether it was the county or whether the government turned it down, but it was turned down because it was deemed to be unacceptable. Since then, of course, we've had the creation of PUSH, PFSH, as it's now called, Partnership for South Hampshire. And of course, we've got effectively a creation of urban sprawl around the two ports, Porth and Southampton, which is now sprawling gradually north, but without any green lungs. Balancing these comments, of course, we've got the environment as a key part of our policies, a policy that I 100% agree with. I don't necessarily agree with the methods, but nonetheless, I do agree with the general trend of the policies you're putting forward and the green issues that they entail. I also support the biodiversity paper. Now, if we allow continued sprawl north of what I should still call Solent City without any green lungs, then those environment policies seem well to be forgotten. Yes, the CPRE did put an economic case forward, but I'm concentrating on the environmental one, the importance of green lungs, the importance, which again I thought was a policy, of keeping the villages, Wickham, Swanmore, Waltham Chase, Denmead, as separate villages with local gaps in between. That is conservation areas, corridor for green biodiversity. Again, if we concentrate on putting housing in this area, and we have to receive some, I'm not saying there should be none at all, we have to agree to some, then we are going to lose those green lungs, and effectively we're tearing up the environmental policies, which I assume cover the whole of the district rather than just Winchester City itself. Now, that may be a bit unfair about that. I'm arguing, ironically, what Councillor Lerney has quite rightly said, for a fair and even distribution of this housing, bearing in mind we do have environmental policies, we do have a biodiversity policy, which is a very strong one, and we do need those green lungs. If this motion is thrown out, effectively, what we're saying is we don't agree with any of that. Then the housing is going to go on to, as it was before, into sustainable villages. And yes, I also could quote numbers the same as Councillor Lerney has, and quite fair enough. Some of them are planned houses, but I remind her the two MDAs in this area. You've also got the expansion, massive expansion of Eastleigh towards Winchester district. You've also got the gradual narrowing of the gaps between villages in the southern parishes. We've got Westbourne, which is coming very, very close to Wickham. Wickham could well become a suburb of Fareham if we don't have a green belt in between there, and we don't remember these environmental policies. So I very much support this motion. I don't think it's a political one, but it is an environmental one, which is, as I understand it, an existing policy of the City Council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I'll now call on Councillor Weston. We are running short of time, but I will call on Councillor Weston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support this motion. As we all know, we are seeing the loss of our countryside, our important wetlands and grassland that play a huge part on the biodiversity of our district. And so we need to stop unrestricted sprawl in the countryside, and we need to provide recreational areas for all the population in the south of the district that is developing that we have here in the south. And what we have to make sure that we protect and we value what we have. Councillor Murphy made a point to one of the members of the public, and she made reference to David Attenborough's programme highlighting the extinction of animals. We're seeing the extinction of hedgehogs right under our noses, and unless we provide the right environment for our animals and biodiversity, we're going to see a lot more of our common animals that we grew up with extinct here in this country. So we are losing also our wildlife corridors. We're having these little pockets of little wildlife, and they can't get from one area to another. And we need to make sure we have a big corridor so they can actually move around. And this is what's happening with all this development in the countryside that is not really being thought out well enough. So we need our green gaps to help against climate change. And Councillor Pearson, green lungs, absolutely, totally agree with you. We need the space to allow nature to breathe. At the moment, we're suffocating it. And if we don't get a grip of this, we won't have the biodiversity, the animals, the insects, I mean, and the birds that we have grown up with, and our grandchildren won't even know they've ever existed. So please, green gaps are really, really important. So I support this motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. Calling Councillor McLean, please. Councillor McLean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pearson, I think, summed it up very well about green corridors. Being southern parishes myself, representing Durley, Bishop's Waltham, we can see Southampton now encroaching right up to the roundabout on the borders of the Durley ward parish. That building will destroy the whole green corridor that exists right the way up to that roundabout. The residents of Durley, our residents, are extremely concerned about what's going on there. Without wanting to speak for Councillor Cook, when you see what's going on over in Colden Common and Twyford with what's coming in from Eastleigh right up against their borders, it's a huge amount of development. It might not be in Winchester, but by gosh, it's on the border of it. So we really have to think about that. And to hear Councillor Learning, I think, trying to protect the north of the district, by God, I'm trying to protect the south of the district. Thank you for that chance to contribute, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Councillor Porter, please. Councillor Porter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. This is a really complex issue and it's a very interesting one. And Winchester is a member of the PUSH partnership, which is investigating the feasibility of a green belt, not only across our district, but other boroughs too. And we await the results of that investigation with interest. And we're also examining, as part of the local plan and the future of planning, how the three new descriptors of land, which are growth, renew and protect, can be used to protect green spaces that we value right across the district. So in the light of the debate and the clear complexities that this motion has presented today, I'd like to move an amendment that the motion be referred to Cabinet after consideration by the local plan advisory group of the issues raised this evening in relation to the motion, including the government's imposed increase in the district's housing target, potentially to more than 10,000 houses in the next 10 years, and the consequent risk that the proposal concentrates a damaging amount of additional housing in the north, west and northeast of Winchester. The government's white paper, the planning for the future, and the expectation that the government is seeking agility in protecting those green spaces by designation of growth, renew and protect. Whether in fact there are better mechanisms to protect green space right across the whole district, and the implication for building homes where they're needed in the district when 40% is also covered by the national park. And finally, also the results of the investigation into the feasibility of a green belt as part of our membership of PUSH. I'd like to propose that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Do I have a seconder for the amendment?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Todd here.
Councillor Todd. Thank you, Councillor Todd. I'll move straight to debate. Do I have people, new members? Do you have any new members for debate? On the amendment. That's on the amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I've had Councillor Evans, I've had my hand up for some time and I would like to speak to the amendment when it's my turn.
We lost the mayor.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. We're just conferring.
Members, we thought it might be useful to clarify that the amendment before you today is to refer the matter to Cabinet after consideration by the local plan advisory group of the issues raised this evening due to the complex issues that Councillor Porter has outlined. On the amendment, we have Councillor Evans, Councillor Horrell, Councillor Brooke, Councillor Weir and Councillor Laming registered to speak so far, Mr. Mayor.
That's good. Thank you very much indeed for that. Can we please have Councillor Evans, please, to address the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support the amendment, and I speak as a Southern Parishes member where we are surrounded by housing, and we've had that mentioned tonight. I read the CPRE, I think it was called Introducing a South Hants Green Belt. I read it on the 20th of June. I looked back in my notes and really it was a response to Wellbourne and enough is enough, because we've got this huge development right on our borders of Wickham and Knoll. And I thought, yes, this does deserve some consideration. Then we had in August the government's declaration that the whole system is going to be changed with 3 areas, zones or whatever you call it. Plus we've got the national park, which is pushing us down. So it's a sort of concentrated area. And we can't double an area. We can't have a green belt and then also with the council have growth, renewal or protect. And it's unlikely that the national park is going to have growth. It's probably just going to be renewal and protect. No large settlements in the national park. So I would like to support the fact that we will go to the local plan advisory group. I think when we last met, Councillor Porter proposed, and it was agreed by all of us, that we would become a pilot. We can't become a pilot, in my view. I don't know what the advisory group will say, but we can't become a pilot if we've already decided to designate the area in a different way. And if you look at the map in that document from CPRE, the suggested area is huge. It covers all the area to the north of Portsmouth and Southampton, but the bits in between, and then it goes round Winchester to the west, and then just leaves the north of Winchester and the northeast over to Alresford. So, you know, there's a serious consideration here with the government's new proposal. So, in my view, to support this motion tonight, as worthy as our wish is to preserve our countryside with all the benefits it brings, we need to look at it more carefully in the light of the government proposals. And I support the amendment to take it to the local advisory group and then on to Cabinet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. May I call now on Councillor Horrell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak on the amendment, and I welcome the fact that we're suggesting additional debate, which was part of our purpose this evening. I would say, though, I'm taking offence at the personal attack made by one of the councillors during her speech this evening. I would say we're not ashamed about bringing the issue this evening. It's a matter of principle that we should all be debating in the issues and options for our area. It's not about NIMBYism. And building in the countryside actually wastes limited resources. It increases travel and creates more pollution. And the use of land effectively to preserve the most valuable and beautiful parts of our district is not something that we should be ashamed of. Consultation for many of us regarding the government's papers is very important, and we'll be lobbying in our group the government to amend their approach. And I would suggest this evening that the whole question of the housing and planning papers is deflecting from the debate about whether we should actually consider the Greenbelt as part of our strategy. We didn't even consider that in the local plan options and issues paper that was withdrawn at the last moment recently. And what I'm suggesting here this evening is that we should at least have that conversation. It's not a linear discussion for us. Brownfield is a proactive approach, and we did decide that as a group that we should be looking at all options for our district to get the best balance, and that is the appropriate thing, the best balance for all residents in our district. And actually a question for Councillor Porter: when did we decide to build 1,000 houses on Sir John Moore Barracks? That's news, I think, to most residents locally. So, Councillor Porter, I would urge you to support the motion. Let's work with other authorities like Eastleigh to actually come together in an important issue. And actually, by taking this offline and doing an amendment that takes it to the local plan committee and back to cabinet, we're actually reducing that debate that we should be having. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would reject the amendment that has been proposed by Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. I'll move on to Councillor Weir, please. Councillor Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to support this amendment. I've also read the CPRE proposals and the supporting evidence prepared by the New Economics Foundation, an organisation I've worked with and have a lot of respect for. The analysis they've undertaken, and which is used by CPRE to make the case for a South Hampshire Greenbelt designation, could equally be applied across the whole of Winchester district. Indeed, I'd strongly encourage Councillor Porter and the strategic planning team to consider this analysis as part of any pilot for the next local plan. Then the process of housing and commercial land allocation can be fairly and effectively undertaken, informed by the health, well-being, economic and ecosystem benefits of protecting green space in all areas of the district. All the findings should be weighed against each other and well-reasoned strategies developed for delivery of government-imposed housing numbers under the new planning system. Second, I'd like to raise the paradox of the other side's support for the Southampton Airport expansion, which lies outside our district, yet its impact will be greatest for many of our residents. As the New Economics Foundation, the same organisation advising CPRE, pointed out in a blog just last week, the dodgy economics behind expanding our airports. The last defence of the ambitious airport executive is that new airport capacity creates new jobs. But it's not that simple. When they looked at the expansion of Southampton Airport, the New Economics Foundation found that the economic value of these jobs, worth around 50 million, was wiped out by the cost of the associated carbon emission, worth between 28 and 85 million. And that's if they assumed that every job would materialise. They went on. Even without the dangers of increasing carbon emissions, the economics of airport expansion don't stack up. As we look down the barrel of the climate crisis, a global pandemic and collapsing UK hospitality sectors, it's possibly the worst investment we could make. So how does the other side reconcile their support for this expansion, supposedly on economic growth grounds, while advocating a green belt across the very same area? This is a very complex matter and we owe it to our residents to consider it very carefully. I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. I'll move on to Councillor Brooke, if I may, please. Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Supporting this motion this evening does not mean that this would not go to a local plan advisory group, as stated in the amendment. In fact, we would welcome the wider discussion. This motion says we support the principle. It doesn't say we will implement this. So the wider discussion would, of course, be necessary once the motion had been supported this evening. Earlier on in the evening, one of the Cabinet members said they were strong enough to make decisions in this administration. Then in debating this motion, personally attacked Councillor Horam, which I think is disgusting. I've always been very much in support of Councillor Porter previously, but failure to commit to supporting this in principle does not allow us to open up the discussions with our neighbouring authorities in a good amount of time and to be able to bring it forwards in a reasonable amount of time with our local plan before the implementation of the white paper numbers. It would also leave us further exposed with not meeting our district's numbers to ad hoc housing within some of the areas that we've want to deem greenbelt. We have seen during this pandemic more than ever the necessity for green spaces within our district and just how vital they are. All I've heard from the opposition in regard to this motion, in fact, for the whole of this full council meeting, is attack Conservatives, rather than actually standing their ground in a factual way. I do not support this amendment. I support the original motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Can I move on to Councillor Lamming, please? Councillor Lamming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The thing that disturbs me more than anything else is the fact that we have people saying that we need open debate, which I do agree with. But the real fact of the matter is that we need to protect the whole of the district from unwanted development and have constructive development. But the core matter is that we've had a 48% increase in our housing numbers foisted upon us by government. We really need that to be discussed out in the open, and also the answer to the question of why has places like Basingstoke, which have had their numbers reduced significantly, and we need to really take a grip of this whole thing. So I would suggest that I'm going to support this amendment.
Can I call on Councillor Todd, please? Councillor Todd, who seconded the motion and reserved the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak on this amendment. And to be clear, this is not, we're not asking people this evening, we're not asking members this evening to vote against the motion. What we're saying is that there is work that needs to be done before many of us feel able to know that we've done due diligence to sign up to what's proposed. It's frankly, it's not enough for Councillor Horrell to say that she wants to raise the issue of the green belt, but asks us to forget 10,000 extra houses. That's 20% growth assumed for every single town, village and city in the entire district. It's the biggest increase in Hampshire. And we've got to be mindful of it in thinking about any policies that we take on. The point is that we need informed debate. We need to understand the consequences of where a policy might take us. She talked about where we keep the countryside protected, and I would strongly support finding ways to protect the countryside in the south of our district. but I also support protecting the countryside in the north of our district. And so I think it's useful to have a careful look at the countryside that we're proposing to protect in the Conservative motion, because I support the desire for biodiversity. I support the desire for green lungs. I support the desire to protect our countryside, but I think that's a debate that needs to be had in the context of the whole district. Now, there was talk of whether we can build on brownfield site or other such things, but the amount of housing extra that we're being asked to build, in theory, by the government is 10,000 houses. That's equivalent to 5 times Kings Barton. And I'd like to show you a diagram so that you're aware of what it is we're being asked to sign up to. This is a map of the district. This section here in green is the South Downs National Park, and very little of that 10,000 is likely to come from there. And if this is the area, it excludes Whiteley at the bottom, this is the area that we're being asked to look at. I mean, if people have difficulty seeing it at the moment, I can maybe make it slightly clearer for you. And at the top is the area that would be required to, here we go, take the bulk of the 10,000 houses that's being talked about. Winchester, Hursley, Kingsworthy, Alsford, Micheldever, Sutton Scrutiny, Micheldever Station. So what's being proposed in front of us today is a motion that it may be possible to achieve 10,000 houses on brownfield sites, but it's a huge amount of housing, 5 times Kings Barton, twice what was previously proposed for Micheldever Station. And effectively, if we just proceed on the basis that none of it will happen in the south and none of it will happen in the middle, and it all goes into this priority zone for growth, which the Conservatives are effectively proposing today, that we end up with an unbalanced approach. There are questions we need to answer and that need to be properly looked at before the council commits to this as a policy. Is there a way to protect all our green space, not just this area here to the south? Is there a way, does this plan put the north of the district at risk? And those of us represent northern areas and who benefit mainly from the countryside to the north of the district inevitably want to know that that is not a serious risk. And if you look at that map and you look at the scale of what we might be asked to do by the government, it's very hard to see how that isn't a major risk. And we're not asking you to oppose the motion tonight. What we're saying is there are issues here that need to be properly looked at, as Councillor Porter suggested. I mean, there is evidence of green belts, incidentally, causing intensification inside areas that are close to the green belts, where you end up with, you know, a bungalow coming down and 10 houses going up, and it being very hard to resist in planning terms. I have no idea if that's the case, but these issues are real. They need to be properly understood. The process that Councillor Porter has proposed is the right one, and therefore I would ask you all to support the amendment tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. I now will call on Councillor Horrell, who's the right to reply to the amendment. That's Councillor Horrell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak again. And I would concur that a green belt is part of the strategic issues and options. And I only wish that they had been tabled by the administration before today, so that we could have had a proper discussion when the original papers were prepared. I am perturbed that Councillor Todd and others are using the housing numbers that are still part of a consultation put forward by government, and for which many of us are advocating a change, are being used to cause scaremongering and concern. And for those of us who represent the north of the district, we certainly wouldn't be doing anything to harm those residents. However, the equalisation of housing and the debate around the district about where new homes and indeed new businesses might be sited is an important one that this council should address. And unfortunately, the local plan committee is a narrowing of that, and the opportunity to talk as a council in full, I think, has been helpful this evening and allowed us to see hear everyone's views. And I see no justification for the development in the countryside for us. We have the opportunity as a district to ensure that we protect everyone, those gaps, that valued countryside that we have. And the administration put forward a climate change emergency declaration, put the green agenda at the heart of everything that you wanted to do. You talked about well-being, you talked about all those environmental issues. Well, surely this gives us that opportunity. And may I say that the green belt is not defined. It is for the authorities locally to think about how we might map that out. It isn't a black line on a map, as indicated by one of the councillors this evening. It is, in fact, up for discussion amongst us all, how we can work together in partnership. And I heard recently from cabinet members working in partnership was a good thing, and therefore I would recommend that we do that. Our representation at Push is clearly important, and I welcome their assessment of the green belt, and I would be hopeful that we as councillors will be able to understand that recommendation and participate in the implications for the Winchester district as a consequence of that. So I would suggest that this motion that we're putting forward does not imply any support at all for development in the countryside to the north, west, east of the district, as recommended by others tonight. We see no justification for that assumption in actually recommending that the green belt should be part of our consideration. So members, I would ask this evening that you think carefully about this being part of our debate, part of the way that we can assess all of the issues and options impacting the council. And I understand that we will be able to then put forward a plan that we can all support and feel that we've had the opportunity to air our views. So, Mr. Mayor, I continue to move the motion that was presented earlier and do not support the amendment as recommended by Councillor Porter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. The point of order now is that we should vote on the amendment, and the vote on the amendment should be done on a roll call basis. So I'm going to ask Democratic Services for a roll call vote on the amendment, not the main motion itself.
Hello members, David Blakemore here again. So as Mr. Mayor said, I would call out your names in alphabetical order, and if you could indicate if you are for, against or abstain on the amendment to the motion. Councillor Ackwell.
For.
Councillor Becker.
For.
Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Bentote.
For.
Councillor Bronk.
For.
Councillor Brooke.
Against.
Councillor Clear.
For.
Councillor Clementson, I believe, has left the meeting. Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Krask.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
Against.
Councillor Cutler.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Fern.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For.
Councillor Gemmell.
Against.
Councillor Godfrey.
Against.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
For.
Councillor Hiscock.
For.
Councillor Horrell. Councillor Horrell.
Against.
Councillor Humby.
Against.
Councillor Hutchison.
For.
Councillor Laming.
For.
Councillor Lerney.
For.
Councillor Lumby.
Against.
Councillor Mather.
Against.
Councillor McLean. Councillor McLean.
Again, against.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Murphy.
For.
Councillor Pearson.
Against.
Councillor Porter.
For.
Councillor Power.
For.
Councillor Prince.
For.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
Councillor Raffel.
Against.
Councillor Scott.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Todd.
For.
Councillor Weir.
For.
Councillor Weston.
Against.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you, members.
The amendment is carried. So the motion is as amended.
Perhaps we can just ask Mrs. Kirkman to assist.
Yeah, of course, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Mayor, the amendment is carried and therefore the motion as amended shall take the place of the original motion and become the substantive motion to which further amendments or a vote can be taken.
Is that clear, councillors? Okay.
Yes.
Agenda item number 7, no?
No, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Mayor, we now have
to have a vote.
Motion
Okay.
in front of us.
Sorry, we have to vote on this.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So the motion is to a vote.
So I need to go to a roll.
We need another roll call, I'm afraid. So we're going to have to go through this again.
Okay.
Can I call on Democratic Services to put a roll
Mr.
call?
Mayor, may I ask a question?
Councillor Horrell?
Are we now not allowed to speak to the substantive motion?
I have a ruling on that.
Mr. Mayor, it is within your gift if you wish for further debate. When you move to the amendment, you established that there was already sufficient debate to move to the amendment. If there is further debate and there were members still listed on that, it is in your gift to offer that time to the members, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, to add to that, Councillor Brooke here, do I not get my right to reply? My reserved right?
That was on the original motion and not the amended motion, the amendment. I will give some time over to debate on the original motion if it is required.
No, it's not on the original.
On the motion which is amended. That is debate on the amended motion. And I can take councillors who wish to enter the debate or those who are currently in line. Councillor Brooke, do you wish to address the meeting on the amended motion?
Yes, please, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
You can. Please fire ahead.
So, as Councillor Horrell said in her introduction to the original version of the motion, the 5 purposes of the Green Belt and the MPPF are to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, to prevent neighbouring towns from merging into one another, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns, and to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging recycling of derelict and other urban land. We need to consider the needs of our district carefully against these. Firstly, preventing the unrestricted urban sprawl of large built-up areas has never been more needed than right now. With the recent government white paper and the change in rules of duty to cooperate, we are more likely to see these developments on our borders, and indeed the disastrous proposals in the EC local plan right on the edge of our district and the destruction of some of our treasured open spaces to allocate a new road even before the white paper is evidence enough that we need to act to protect our green spaces. Likewise, with the prevention of built-up areas merging into one another, identifying land as green belt would prevent this merge, preventing areas within our district from losing their identities. The third point of safeguarding the countryside from encroachment would have given us a far better argument against the road being built through our ancient woodland and destroying our habitats, and as Councillor Weston said, will only serve to further reduce the already decreasing hedgehog population within our district. The Green Belt policy is not an outright prohibition on development in the Green Belt. so it doesn't entirely push all the development north, and as Councillor Horrell said, is still up for debate as to where the green belt lines would be. It is rather the green belt as a prohibition on inappropriate development in the absence of very special circumstances, which in our countryside we are certainly needing. Preserving the special character of our historic towns is particularly pertinent within our district, steeped in history from King Alfred right through to the part our district plays in the D-Day landings. The last point of assisting in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land is something we've always been keen to continue. Our brownfield sites, whilst limited in number, provide perfect areas for regeneration. The green belt would send a clear message to potential developers about our wishes and expectations for those areas that we allocated to it. With the climate emergency declaration putting the green agenda at the heart of all our council policies, this motion, as it previously was, but now with the amendment to take it to the LPAG, this motion sits perfectly within this agenda and very much supports the principle of sustainable development within the district, ensuring the enjoyment of our precious countryside, the value of which has come to the fore during COVID-19. I would have urged you to support the previous motion. However, the motion as it stands at least is a compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank this councillor.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Evans here. Could I request that the motion be put? The amended motion be put.
Mr. Mayor, we did have a point of order from Councillor Pearson, which I think would be useful to clarify prior to hearing Councillor Evans.
Right. Okay. Councillor Pearson has got a point of order. Councillor Pearson.
Yes.
Exactly the amendment, Mr. Mayor, which I'm happy to assist with. Councillor Porter confirms that in the light of the debate and the clear complexities that the motion presents, she moved an amendment that the motion be referred to Cabinet after consideration by the local plan advisory group of the issues raised this evening in relation to the motion. Those included several bullet points, but also confirms the motion as put by Councillor Horrell and outlined in your papers this evening, members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. That was very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll move on. I have a number of councillors who also wish to.
Councillor Evans has put that the motion now be put.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep. So Councillor Evans's motion to put to the.
We need to take a vote if all those in favour of the motion now be put.
Right. Can I have an indication for those who wish?
Do a roll call, Mr. Mayor, of that, please. That's the only way we can clarify if we have that majority.
Democratic Services will conduct another roll call to determine whether the motion can be put.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. David here again. As Mr. Mayor just said, we're now voting on the motion put by Councillor Therese that the motion as amended now be put. So I'll go through members in alphabetical order again. Councillor Atman.
4.
Councillor Becker.
4.
Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Bentote.
4.
Councillor Bronk.
4.
Councillor Brooke.
Against.
Councillor Clear.
4.
Councillor Clemenson has left the meeting. Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Krask.
4.
Councillor Cunningham.
4.
Councillor Cutler.
4.
Councillor Evans.
4.
Councillor Fern.
4.
Councillor Ferguson.
4.
Councillor Gemmell.
No. Against.
Councillor Godfrey.
Against.
Councillor Gordon Smith.
4.
Councillor Hiscock.
4.
Councillor Horrell.
Against.
Councillor Humby.
Against.
Councillor Hutchison.
4.
Councillor Laming.
4.
Councillor Lerney.
4.
Councillor Lumby.
Against.
Councillor Mather.
At what point does she?
Against.
Councillor McLean.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Murphy.
4.
Councillor Pearson.
Against.
Councillor Porter.
4.
Councillor Power. Councillor Prince.
4.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
Councillor Raffel.
Against.
Councillor Scott.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Todd.
For.
Councillor Weir.
For.
Councillor Weston.
Against.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you, members. That is carried.
It's carried.
So the motion as amended.
The motion as amended is carried.
No.
No.
Mr. Mayor, there was a point of order that the motion now be put, the question now be put. We've just had that vote.
Yep.
And that vote has been carried. And therefore, under paragraph 7 of the council procedure rules, Councillor Horrell has a right of reply. So we therefore give Councillor Horrell her right to reply and immediately then move to the vote on the substantive but amended motion, Mr. Mayor.
Fine, that's clear. Councillor Horrell, can we please have your right of reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I won't prolong this any longer. Saddened, I think, to have the discussion curtailed this evening by Councillor Evans, because absolutely this is what we were hoping that we would all discuss, the green belt and what it may or may not add to our local plan consideration. I do accept the majority of the chamber wishes to debate the issue in the local plan committee and then on to cabinet, but I do hope Councillor Porter will appreciate the level of discussion that this motion has generated this evening amongst members, and indeed a number of members who've been unable to speak, who had indicated they wish to do so, and that she will allow this debate to continue so that we can come up for the very best option for our local plan for all members of the district. So I understand completely that the majority feeling is with the amendment as proposed by Councillor Porter, and I think therefore, Mr. Mayor, I welcome the chance to at least embed that as our decision this evening, and that we can continue this very important discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Thank you. So we will then move on to the vote on the amended substantive motion. Handing over to Democratic Services for a roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I will run through members in alphabetical order. If you indicate you're for, against or abstain. Councillor Ackwell.
For.
Councillor Becker.
For.
Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Bentote.
For.
Councillor Bronk.
For.
Councillor Brooke.
For.
Councillor Clear.
For.
Councillor Clemenson is absent. Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Krask.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Cutler.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Fern.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For.
Councillor Gemmell.
For.
Councillor Godfrey.
For.
Councillor Gordon Smith.
For.
Councillor Hiscock.
For.
Councillor Horrell.
For.
Councillor Humby.
For.
Councillor Hutchison.
For.
Councillor Laming.
For.
Councillor Learning.
For.
Councillor Lumby.
For.
Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor McLean.
For.
Councillor Miller.
For.
Councillor Murphy.
For.
Councillor Pearson.
For.
Councillor Porter.
For.
Councillor Power.
For.
Councillor Prince.
For.
Councillor Reid.
For.
Councillor Raffel.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Todd.
For.
Councillor Weir.
For.
Councillor Weston.
For.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams.
I'm for.
Thank you. Members, I can confirm that the substantive motion as amended has been carried. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. The substantive motive is carried. I move on to agenda item number 7, changes to committee memberships.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Following the recent resignation of a councillor, I can confirm there are no changes to the number of seats on committees at this time. However, I have been notified of the following change as a consequence of the resignation. This is for Business and Housing Policy Committee. Councillor Gordon Smith is to replace former council committee member. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Lisa. All members have copies of the questions and the answers which were circulated electronically prior to the meeting and also available on the Council's website. A reminder that our procedure is that only the questioner is able to ask one supplementary question and should indicate accordingly. Members are reminded that our procedural rules allow a total time occupied by questions and the answer and the supplementary shall not exceed 30 minutes. In order to maximise the opportunity for questions to be answered, can I ask that supplementary questions are succinct and to the point, please? Question number 1, Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Porter for her response, but my question was, or there's two questions really that neither seem to be answered. My question was, are we at full strength? Which I think is a very straightforward question, and it is just, are we or are we not? And if we're not, how short are we of full-time officers? And the second part of the question that I saw the response, but we as a district, particularly in the southern parishes yet again, are finding an awful lot of breaches of our planning regulations happening over the weekends when we have nobody we can phone up and say, can you come down and look at this? And I would refer Councillor Porter to the paddocks, particularly down in Durley, and I think it's called the Coppice, where works were carried out over weekends during lockdown, and possibly Ford Farm as another one where works were carried out and we couldn't get an enforcement officer out. So Councillor Porter, could you try just answering those three questions or two questions for me as they were the original question? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor McLean, and it's Councillor Porter here. We have recruited some excellent agency staff in my time, and we currently have some to fill the gaps that we or inevitably have in any department where you do have people leaving or ill or on maternity leave from time to time. So we do have agency staff, but I can assure you that they are very good and they fill the gaps. As Councillor McLean knows as well, I have been interested to see if an out-of-hours service would deliver a better service for Winchester City Council, and I've asked the same question, and actually on receiving answers I do believe it would be cosmetic only. As we've said in the reply, it isn't the best use of resources. We often need the use of an environment agency, environmental health, the police to attend the sites where there's a severe issue going on at the weekend, and frequently meetings on site have to be arranged to make sure that all of those are there. And as you know, those agencies aren't keen to work at the weekends either. So at the moment, we believe that the best use of our money is to make sure that we can get down there during the week and make sure that the notices we're serving have been ratified by the appropriate legal teams.
If I may, Mr Mayor, question 1 has still not been answered. Are we at full strength? And if not, how far off it are we?
I will have to double check, but my understanding is that we have agency staff completing the full-time list that you have on your paper.
Thank you. That's enough on that question. Question number 2, Councillor Power, please.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I had trouble finding my and I have no supplementary, thank you.
Councillor Power, are you asking your question?
Mr Mayor, I am sorry, I have no supplementary, thank you.
Oh, you have no supplementary. Thank you for that. Question number 3, Councillor Godfrey, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm grateful for the detailed answer from Councillor Cutler. My supplementary relates to the very small number of officers who are using the West Wing and city offices at the moment, and yet the council is delivering a full range of services. What action has been taken to review the council's need for these very important assets, and whether or not we should be looking at reducing our property holdings in the city centre when we clearly do not need to have them?
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Cutler, please, if I may ask you to reply.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. I fully understand the basis of your question. It is something that we will consider in time. As you mentioned earlier, the real work on medium-term financial strategy, we will have to look at a whole series of options, and one of them will be, for sure, that what level of office space do we require to continue to deliver a good service.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Question number 4, Councillor Evans. Do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Thompson, for the reassuring answer. I wouldn't ask this question if there hasn't been quite a lot of cases of not knowing what's going on in our ward. And the problem doesn't come with the senior managers, it tends to come lower down. So could you or the Chief Executive please ensure that the whole team are aware of this guarantee that ward members will be kept informed of not every nitty-gritty, but of the important issues that go on in their ward and the important contacts?
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Yes, it is something that I have regular discussions with the Chief Exec about, and I can assure you that I know that the Chief Exec does actually remind all members of the teams to actually inform ward members when there are important matters going on in their wards, to keep them up to date. And obviously it is something that I think is really important, and hopefully we will get that right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Question number 5, Councillor Lumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the portfolio holder for his responses to some of my points. Rather as with Councillor McLean, he doesn't seem to have spotted all the questions. The 4th bullet point seems to have been overlooked, and a good part of what was asked in the remaining questions seemed to have been overlooked as well. I'm sure that's just an oversight rather than anything more sinister. Although I have noticed a tendency by the administration to partly answer questions, and we saw that earlier, or in all parts they don't necessarily seem to want to answer. So to reiterate, what residual liability do places for people have in relation to Meadowside? What contractual provisions were in place prior to data being provided to everyone active? Those are questions asked before. I don't think I should have to repeat those for a supplemental, nor I think it's acceptable as an approach. I don't know whether it's the plan or not, to half answer questions so the supplemental is used up trying to get a proper answer. My supplemental, therefore, is to ask that all relevant papers be provided to councillors for review, and for the timetable for the re-tender of Meadowside to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. Councillor Prince, if you please respond. Councillor Prince, are you?
Yeah, I didn't see that it was working. Sorry, my apologies. In terms of the full question, we will get the bullet points which Councillor Lumby considers have not been completed, and answer his further questions in full detail in due course. But thank you for raising those questions. They are very valid questions. I will seek the answers and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prince. Question number 6 is from Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell, is Councillor Bell online?
Yes, I'm online. I have no supplemental.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Bell.
Thank you.
Question number 7, Councillor Mather, you've received your answer to the question. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, the portfolio holder, for that answer. Could I just ask the portfolio holder whether he's mindful of the problems that elderly people have getting access to central Winchester? They don't all have blue badges. Some of them travel in buses, and some of them still drive or get dropped off in convenient places. And at the moment, I am getting complaints from elderly in my ward who ask me to take up their issues and say just what great difficulty they're having taking a bus into the bus station in order to change to another bus because the buses can't keep their timetables, and how difficult it is for them to get dropped off with streets being closed at weekends, which I know some people are in favour of, but you know there is part of the population that it causes great inconvenience to, and I just wanted reassurance from the portfolio holder that he is aware of the problems that old people have. They don't all ride bicycles, but they do take buses. Some of them, if they're more hale and hearty, walk, and they do have cars and need to be dropped off and to park near where they need to be. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Could I ask Councillor Todd to reply, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Mather, for your question. I'm aware that, for example, the original design for the square scheme was causing some people access difficulties. It is the case that with the measures as they currently are, there is quite literally nowhere in Winchester where you used to be able to drive to that you can not drive to now. The routes may be difficult, but different. But in terms of being able to drive to particular locations, I'm not aware of any streets which it used to be possible to drive to, which it is no longer possible to drive to. I have made a point since the measures came in, although the City Council is not responsible for them and the decision maker on their design is the County Council. I have made a point of regularly driving the one-way system to understand the impact that it's having on different routes. And it became clear, for example, that there were issues with the arrangements in Jury Street, and I was strongly advocating that we needed to find a new solution. That new solution has been put in place, and it has made a dramatic difference to the amount of queuing that had previously been happening in the city centre. Similarly, I remain concerned that there were too many delays on North Walls. I spent a happy time standing at the Hyde Abbey Road lights with a stopwatch, trying to work out exactly how they were set, discovered that there was a major issue. Those lights have since been reprogrammed, and that has significantly increased the amount of flow in the city. I've also, on behalf of the city, asked for extra measurement to be put in place. There has been a proper count of traffic through the square and Great Minster Street, which we are using to help clarify the next stage of work on that particular programme. And there is a counter being installed in Worthy Lane in order to understand how that interrelates with the traffic in Worthy Road and in Hyde, and so that we have a clearer picture of exactly what's going on. This is on top of the Bluetooth data and other data that the County Council collects anyway. So they've also been having conversations about potential further measures that can be used to enable the system to flow more freely, while still recognising the importance of social distancing and the importance of encouraging and enabling more sustainable forms of transport. And let's not forget, as some of you may know, I run a health charity during the day when I'm not being a councillor. The latest evidence on COVID is that it is a truly terrible disease in the event that you get it. We hear a lot about death statistics and they are awful and a tragedy, and too many people have died. But let's also not forget the emerging problem of what some call long COVID, and that's where young fit people are, and I know somebody this has happened to, somebody in their 30s who was very active in sport, caught the disease and has been absolutely polaxed by it, and months later has been knocked sideways and has all kinds of knock-on problems. And I know from people who report into the charity I run, the Men's Health Forum, that this is not a small problem. So we are not going to hold off in terms of making sure that, as far as we're able, that there is the ability for people to social distance in our city. Sustainable transport is one of the things we support as an administration. Social distancing is incredibly important, and we are balancing all of those things and working actively with the County Council where we see there are problems to sort them out. What I would say is, if there are any particular issues that Councillor Mather has raised with her that need to be addressed, we have done so. Of the schemes in the city, the city is leading on the implementation of the square. I've been contacted by people there who had issues, and we changed the scheme to address those issues. So if there are things that she wishes to raise with me, then I'm very happy to take them up and see what can be done for those residents. There is one last request, which is one of the things I am picking up, which has come out of these discussions, is we do lack blue badge places in the city. There are times when people who qualify for a blue badge find it hard to find a space in an appropriate place for them to get where they need to get to. And I would particularly ask, if councillors are aware of areas anywhere in the district where there is pressure on blue badge spaces, please let me know, because as part of the parking strategy, we would be keen to expand those to ensure that everybody who needs them is able to access them where they need to.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Question number 8. Councillor Hutchinson, please. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for Councillor Ferguson's very good reply. I don't have a supplementary.
Question number 9. Councillor Brooke, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, please. I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for the response. I would also like to just ask a supplementary that, being as we're just shy of a year away from when the original consultation was due to go out to residents to be consulted on the draft local plan, how far are we away now from putting out the new schedule to keep our residents and parish councils abreast of what our next plan is with regard to the local plan? Thank you,
Councillor Brooke. Councillor Porter, please.
Certainly. Councillor Brooke will be aware that we had a really useful meeting with parish councils on Monday. There were over 70 people on the call, and so many of those parish councils were very grateful for the opportunity to have a really good discussion about the implications of the change in the planning process and their role in it. And we did agree that we would keep those meetings going so that they had the opportunity to have perhaps more of an input on an informal basis before the formal process starts. And as you know, we also agreed that because the white paper has such far-ranging changes in it, that we would move straight to assuming that the new numbers would be coming, and also that the white paper would be an intention rather than just an aspiration of the current government. And that means that We are hoping to do some work with the parish councils over the next few years, and our current officers are making arrangements to make a new local plan action plan, which we hope to take to Cabinet in the autumn or later on in the autumn, and that I hope will answer your question, and also it will give us it means that people will be making an informed decision. If we had put, as you know, if we put the old strategic options to the public, it wouldn't have reflected the numbers of houses that we are most likely to have to accept in the Winchester district. I was going to say as well, we're also committed to doing the consultations with the parishes and the conversations online, because the government is suggesting that digital first is actually the way to go, but also because the participation rate was much higher than I think has been seen on something like a local plan before.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I'll move on to question number 10, if I may. Councillor Krask. Councillor Krask.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the leader for the answer. I think I know the answer to my supplementary question, because certainly the detail within the question on what is a very complex and important matter refers to the range of interpretations, but also that the constitutional review is due in front of the audit and governance before full council in the future. When, I guess the question is, when could we expect a training refresher on the code of conduct for members?
Over to you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Krask, and thank you for the supplementary question. I believe we all have training each year following elections on this. I don't know whether Lisa Kirkman, as the monitoring officer, could respond, but that is when we normally have training on members' interests and code of conduct. If Lisa is available, I wonder whether she could elaborate on that, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'll call on Lisa Kirkman to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Leader. Yes, I can confirm there is a requirement that annual training is undertaken by councillors. We are undertaking a review of the level of training, so a very focused training for new members, and then a lighter touch in terms of a refresh and review for our members who have been here for some time. In respect of any significant changes to the code, there would obviously be a requirement for there to be a training session that is outside of that usual annual review. So we will see the changes that are upon us in this initial change. I anticipate more significant changes when legislation has been laid before us in terms of those changes, but we've been waiting for that. I mean, we've been waiting since January 2019, and I don't have any information as when we can expect that. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirkman. I'll move on to question number 11. Councillor Pearson, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do. Thank you for the response, but I felt there was not much detail. And indeed, I would also like to thank Councillor Todd, because much of what he has said actually goes some way to answering the question regarding congestion. The key thing is there that the second paragraph of the question I asked was about where I've asked, how could you explain these changes along with the closure of the square has improved air quality? I noticed that question was left hanging with another promise that will be dealt with at the Health and Environment Committee. A number of times I've heard that response to questions. It's really going on a little bit longer, and I expected a better response. Perhaps Councillor Murphy could elaborate on that response and at least give a gut feeling as to what she thinks in anticipation of what I presume is in that paper, which is presently being written.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I'll ask Councillor Murphy to respond, if I may, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Pearson, for your question.
As I mentioned in my answer, we just don't have the figures yet because the NOx emissions, they're taken every month and they take 2 or 3 weeks to process. So that's why we don't have the comparable figures from before and afterwards. You asked for my gut feeling. My gut feeling is, I mean, I try to avoid going around the one-way system as much as possible, but when I do, I haven't noticed too much difference in the amount of traffic. I haven't been held up in too many jams. I mean, I've been aware of a few, but then, you know, there were traffic jams when the M3 was closed for some reason way before this. So, yeah, that my main reason that it hasn't been answered is because we are still waiting for the latest NOx readings.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I'll move on to question 12, if I may now. Question 12, Councillor Gemmell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and yes, I do have a supplementary. And I thank the leader for the answer, however short. And I really have just got to ask, are you actually saying then that our IT department is inadequate and unable to support the members, or is it just the administration that wishes to exclude the working members? Although after tonight, as ruthless display of stifling debate, I'm beginning to lean towards the latter.
Thank you, Councillor Gemmell. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for that. I'm not sure it was a question. It's all about individual members' broadband connection, and when the IT unit looked for the optimum time where we wouldn't have, or members and members of the public shouldn't have issues with broadband, it was the best time was between 6 and 8. Now, as it so happens, it's 8:30 now, and in fact, we had issues earlier, but all the evidence points to from 8 o'clock onwards, if you have a weak broadband signal, it deteriorates quite rapidly. And certainly we've had a number of policy committees that have run over by quite a considerable time, and there have been issues with people's technical equipment, and we can't get over that. So at the moment, and because we're going to be holding our meetings online, certainly for the near future, we are sticking with the meetings being run between 6 and 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Question number 13, Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Thompson for her reply. However, can I ask the leaders specifically about my question in paragraph 2? Can I take it that she agrees we set up a joint group to lead on major projects? And if so, I look forward to the invitation regarding this initiative being set up as soon as possible so that we can get to work. I look forward to hearing the leader's response. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell, and thank you for the question and the supplementary. We already do have an all-party group set up looking at the individual major projects, and they are called the Project Open Forum. And they are open not only to specific members who sit on those forums, but also any other councillors and members of the public who want to come along. So I don't feel inclined to set up yet another all-party group. And I also have to say, I don't find it very helpful when I find comments by our MP on in the Hampshire Chronicle, basically being rude about the council, because that isn't helpful at all, and actually it doesn't make me feel inclined to sort of put my hand out, if you like. But that said, of course, you do know at the moment that we have been holding regular joint Cabinet and Shadow Cabinet meetings, so we can keep you fully updated on the current COVID crisis. And also, you and I have regular one-to-ones. So I do think there's plenty of opportunity for you and your Cabinet and also all members of the Council to get involved in all of these projects and issues that are of concern to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Question number 14, Councillor Miller. Councillor Miller, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, whilst it's obvious that there are certain assets that may be worth considering selling because it's a strong position in the market, but things like the new doctor surgery, should we not be also weighing up the long-term benefit of us owning assets in the middle of our city where there'll be great benefits to future generations of us having control of them?
Thank you, Councillor Miller.
Absolutely, Councillor Miller. As many members will be aware, over many years I have been a big supporter of the council being a significant landowner within the city. Many of the issues we have with Central Winchester could have been avoided if the council hadn't sold off various bits and pieces in previous generations. However, there are instances, and I would go back to a disposal I made many years ago where I disposed of the restaurant that's now disposed of God Begot House, which is now ASK. Now, that's a Grade 1 listed building. There was very little the council would be able to do with that as a future asset, and we were offered a very significant sum of money. Clearly, in that kind of situation, you balance up what you can do with that money coming in and take the decision on that basis. But my predilection is normally to look at retaining assets, or at least the freehold wherever possible, but sometimes that just doesn't make any financial sense, and it's clear that we're very unlikely to have future use for the land in question.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. I've just got time to take one more question. Councillor Cook, question 15. Councillor Cook.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have a supplementary question, and I do thank the portfolio holder, Councillor Prince, for answering my question. But I am a tad confused, and the reasons for that is, am I not right in saying, according to the paragraph 9.1, which is in the CAB paper 3249, it says the council is responsible for transferring data related to members. So my supplementary question is, was it in fact the council that wrote to the members and got the explanation in advance and then was able to transfer the personal details of the members of Places Leisure to our new company? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Prince, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Finally, I think this is the last question, and I'll try and keep my response to the point. We have looked into this in significant detail with legal advice and legal support in looking at this question, and it has been deemed the appropriate route that we took involved the September the 1st letters that went to members so that they could make a choice, and then it was a matter of looking at what GDPR regulations we had to fulfill, and they have been fulfilled both by the two operators that have been involved and ourselves. And to answer your question, the data was transferred between the operators from one operator to another. That is how I see it, and the legal advice that we had, I am sure, said that as well. So if there's if you found an anomaly, I will look for it after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you,
No,
Councillor.
I'm just quoting the CAB papers. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Councillor Prince, thank you for your response. We've now run out of time, and so that concludes the formal business for this evening.
Matthew, can you please